I signed the contract that saved my son-in-law's business, only to overhear him call me the old man who finally did something useful. When he later issued an ultimatum to leave my own house, my daughter's silent nod confirmed I was fighting alone, turning my grief into a cold, calculated plan for justice. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The day I signed away my reputation, I thought I was buying my daughter's happiness. It bought me contempt instead. Just 3 weeks earlier, I had liquidated one of the only things I still owned free and clear, my vintage 1970 Ford F-100 truck. I didn't need the antique for my landscape architecture firm, Cruise Design, but I loved it. The rumble of the engine was the sound of my youth. Clifford had been desperate, claiming he needed quick collateral for a bridge loan to land a big real estate deal. Dad, this is the one that sets me up for life. Just need a temporary guarantee. I'll make sure you get it back. I'd kept a fixed smile, nodded, and signed the papers at the bank, handing over the truck's title to cover his shortfall. The bank appraiser valued the truck at $2,500. That check hit Clifford's account, and I watched my favorite machine leave my driveway, traded for a promise. The tightness in my chest was the first sign of the coming storm. That Tuesday morning, I sat across a polished conference table from Marcus Chen, my client of 2 decades. I was there to perform the second, more dangerous favor. Marcus studied the portfolio spread between us, his expression skeptical. The photos showed small yards, basic flower beds, nothing like the Gateway Commercial Plaza project he was developing. Eldon, you know I trust your judgment, but this kid's portfolio is thin. You sure about this? I met his eyes, kept my voice steady, professional. He's family, Marcus. He needs a break. I'm vouching for him personally. He won't let you down. Marcus leaned back, tapping his pen against the contract. The landscaping scope included native plant installations, irrigation systems, hardscaping for 3 acres. The total was $180,000. Clifford had the equipment barely, and a crew of 2. I was betting my 35-year professional reputation on potential rather than proof. This contract was the cornerstone of Clifford's entire shaky business plan. It was the last best thing I could give them. All right, Marcus said finally, extending his hand. For you, Eldon. But if this goes sideways, it won't. I shook his hand, firm and confident, though the tightness in my chest, the same knot I felt handing over the truck title, returned. I was burning bridges for my son-in-law, hoping Elma's marriage would stabilize if Clifford felt successful, hoping my daughter would smile again the way she used to. I'd seen her fear, her exhaustion, the way she flinched when he raised his voice. I believed this contract was the key to unlocking the old Elma. The drive home through Cascade City's afternoon traffic gave me time to rehearse how I'd tell them. Casual, not like I'd called in a major favor, just helping family. By the time I turned onto the street in Portland Heights, I'd convinced myself they'd be grateful. I entered through the front door around 6, juggling my briefcase and keys. The house was quiet for a moment, then voices drifted from the living room. Clifford's low, self-satisfied tone, Elma's light response, almost conspiratorial. I paused in the hallway, setting my briefcase down quietly on the hardwood I'd refinished last spring, preparing to join them. The old man finally did something useful. I froze. My hand tightened on the doorframe. The words landed like physical blows. My breath hitched in my throat, thin and useless. Elma's laugh came soft, almost giddy. He still thinks he's important. Marcus signed it this morning. We're set. I stood there, hidden by the wall of the foyer, listening to them dissect me. I was the old man who finally did something useful. Not the father, not the grandfather, just the tool. My breathing went shallow. The briefcase handle had left a red, angry mark on my palm. I did not announce myself. I walked to my bedroom instead, closed the door quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed. 22 years I'd owned this house, paid every mortgage statement on time, refinanced, repaired, lived a whole life here. Now I was a temporary utility. Dinner at 7 was torture masked as normalcy. My 3-year-old granddaughter, Emma, was already asleep, which meant no buffer of a child's chatter, just 3 adults, and the impossible weight of what I'd overheard. I pushed food around my plate, trying to find an opening, anything to test the boundary they had drawn. Finally, I was thinking about adding built-in bookshelves in the living room, I said, my voice carefully controlled. The contractor could start next month. Clifford's fork stopped midway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, deliberately, the sound of porcelain hitting porcelain sharp in the silence. That's our decision to make, Eldon. You just live here now. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. I looked up, saw him watching me, arms crossed, expression cold, arrogant. "This is my house," I heard myself say. Each word was measured, precise. "I've owned it for 22 years. My name is on the deed." Clifford leaned back in his chair, occupying space like he owned it, like the air itself belonged to him. His eyes never left mine. "Listen to me, or get out." The ultimatum hung between us, sharp and final. I turned to Elma, desperate, a final plea escaping my lips. "Elma, say something." She stared at her plate. Her hands trembled slightly, gripping her fork until her knuckles were white. I watched her jaw tighten, watched her make the decision in real time. She looked up just enough to meet my eyes, then dropped her gaze back to the plate, nodding. Slow, deliberate, agreement. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the silence. I did not throw anything. I did not raise my voice. I walked to my bedroom with what dignity I could gather, closed the door, and sat in the dark. Through the wall, I heard their voices resume. Normal conversation, a laugh. They'd moved on already, as if I'd never been at the table. My eyes fell on the photograph on the nightstand. Emma at 6 months old, sitting on my shoulders, both of us grinning at the camera, my hero. That little girl felt like someone I'd invented, someone who'd never existed at all. Through the wall, their laughter drifted into my dark room, and I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was calculating. I thought of the truck, the contract, the contempt. I had spent the last 3 years shrinking myself to fit their narrative. I would not shrink again. I lay down on the covers, the memory of Elma's nod burning in my mind. She had chosen him. That night, I decided on my plan. Strategic withdrawal, followed by a total, legal, scorched earth offensive. Clifford would learn that the old man who finally did something useful was also the man who owned the ground they stood on. I heard the sound of a car idling softly outside, too slow for our quiet street. It was a dark sedan I didn't recognize. The engine cut, and the silence that followed felt heavy, like someone was waiting. Morning light came, but the decision was already made somewhere in those sleepless hours. I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, staring at ceiling textures I'd watched painters apply 15 years ago. From the kitchen came the sounds of breakfast, cabinet doors, running water, Emma's voice asking about cartoons, normal domestic rhythms that now felt like they belonged to strangers. I couldn't stay another night, not as a tolerated guest in my own house. By 9, I had my suitcase open on the bed. I packed methodically, a week's worth of clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the heavy folder of important documents I kept locked in my desk drawer, the property deed, the insurance policies, the will, the evidence of my life. I left most of my belongings untouched. This wasn't surrender. This was strategic withdrawal. From downstairs, a television blared suddenly. Football pregame show, volume unnecessarily loud. Clifford making sure I knew he was comfortable, settled, claiming territory. I folded a shirt with precise creases, placing it in the suitcase. My hands didn't shake. I wouldn't give them that. Footsteps in the hallway. I looked up to see Elma standing in the doorway, eyes red and swollen. She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't speak, didn't step inside. Just stood there, watching me pack, crying silently like her tears alone could communicate what she refused to say aloud. She was offering me pain, but not regret. I zipped the suitcase closed. The sound felt final. By 11, I was ready. I carried the single bag down the stairs, each step deliberate. In the living room, Clifford sprawled across the leather couch, my couch, the one I'd saved 3 months to buy, feet propped on the coffee table, a can of beer in hand despite the morning hour. He stared at the television screen, jaw working on chips, and didn't acknowledge my presence. The dismissal was more effective than a shout. Elma stood at the kitchen threshold, frozen between rooms, between loyalties. Her hands gripped the doorframe until her knuckles went white. "Grandpa!" Emma ran from somewhere behind Elma, barreling toward me with that fearless 3-year-old energy. I set down the suitcase, knelt to her level, catching her in a hug that threatened to crack my composure. "Where are you going?" Her small hands patted my cheeks. "Grandpa has to go away for a little while, sweetheart." "But why?" "Sometimes grown-ups need space." I kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you." I didn't say. "I'm fighting for you." I stood, picked up my suitcase, and walked out my front door. I closed it behind me with a quiet click, standing on the porch I'd built myself, stained myself, and maintained for over 2 decades. The finality of it hit me then, standing outside looking at my own house like a visitor. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, before I could make myself drive. The silence inside the car was a physical weight. Downtown Cascade City had furnished apartments advertised on every third corner. I chose one that didn't ask questions, $2,400 on my credit card for first month, and deposit on a month-to-month lease. The landlord, a tired-looking woman, barely looked at my ID before handing me the paperwork. "Most folks want yearly leases," she mumbled. "Month-to-month is perfect," I said, signing my name in careful script. "I won't be here long." I climbed the stairs to a third-floor space so small and sterile it felt like a hotel room someone forgot to decorate. I set my suitcase on the unfamiliar bed and sat beside it. The silence was absolute. No Emma's laughter, no television noise, no sound of Elma moving through rooms. Just me and the magnitude of what had happened. I had given them my car, my reputation, my home, and they had erased me efficiently. That first day blurred into evening. I unpacked mechanically, ordered food I couldn't eat, stared at my phone. No calls, no messages. Day 2, I walked miles of Cascade City streets, past shops and cafes, parks and office buildings. Everything felt distant, like watching life through thick glass. Around noon, I found myself standing outside the Riverbend County Records office, staring at the door. I had the idea to check the deed, but I couldn't bring myself to face any official yet. I returned to the studio as light faded. My phone remained silent. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since my wife died. I opened my cloud photo album, looking for comfort. I searched for photos of my custom workbench, built-in shelving, and tools in the garage, things Clifford had claimed were shared. I paused at a high-resolution photo of the workbench. It was gone. A deep knot tightened in my gut. I checked the storage file. The entire album of my workshop and custom features, 100 photos of my best work, had been remotely deleted from my account, only hours after I left the house. Clifford must have used my old linked laptop. He wasn't just claiming the house, he was erasing my history inside it. Day 3 morning, the text came, breaking the silence like glass. "Dad, I'm sorry. Just give us some time." I read it 3 times, standing in the middle of my rented room. "Give us some time," I said aloud to the empty apartment. In my house? The audacity of it struck me like cold water. Give them time to what? Enjoy my home? Settle into my furniture? Decide whether they'd permit me to return? Before I could reply, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Petrov, my elderly neighbor. "Eldon, you won't believe the noise here last night. Clifford and his business partners had some kind of huge party, loud music until 2 in the morning. Half the grass on your front lawn is torn up. What in the world is going on?" Clifford was using my house, the home I had just paid $6,200 in property taxes for, to stage business parties and damage the landscaping. I felt the familiar burn of anger, but this time, it was pure fuel. This wasn't neglect. This was calculated disrespect. I thanked Mrs. Petrov, ended the call, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the documents I'd stored digitally. House deed with my name alone on the title. 22 years of mortgage statements showing every payment I'd made. Utility bills spanning decades, all bearing my name and bank account numbers. I spread the papers across the small desk, tracing my finger down dates and amounts, documentation of a life built, board by board, payment by payment. I picked up my phone, looked at Elma's text one more time. Give us some time. Then I looked at the house deed. Eldon Cruz, sole owner. Why did I leave my house? I leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, staring at the deed, my property, my equity, my investment, and I'd walked away from it because Clifford told me to. The victim mentality that had wrapped around me for 3 days began cracking. Underneath it, something harder emerged. Purpose. Clarity. I picked up the phone. It vibrated instantly with an incoming call, the screen flashing the name of a local auto body shop. I stared at the name, a cold dread washing over me. They were calling about the 1970 Ford I had just signed away as collateral. I knew with a certainty that locked my jaw that the truck was already gone too. The call from the auto body shop confirmed the truck was gone, sold by the bank the moment Clifford's quick fix loan defaulted. My beautiful Ford F-100, the last thing my wife and I bought together, was now scrap value to some collector. That loss, the theft of a sentimental anchor, was the final weight that pushed me over the edge from sadness to sustained aggression. I spent the 4th night calculating. My mind wouldn't stop, but now the repetition felt productive rather than destructive. I was seeing the pattern now, each memory clicking into place like evidence at a crime scene. 3 years ago, Elma called. Dad, I'm pregnant. Clifford says we need help with the nursery, just until Emma arrives. I'd said yes immediately. 6 months later, Clifford over dinner. We're saving for a down payment. This market, though, need another few months. I'd nodded, understanding. Housing prices were insane. 1 year in, a casual mention. Market's still terrible. You don't mind us staying a bit longer, right? I'd waved it off. Family helps family. 2 years. Clifford announcing, not asking, we should paint the house. I'm thinking gray. My house. His color choice. Each memory showed me shrinking from owner to host to invisible man in my own home, and I had paid for everything, every single expense. I sat up as dawn broke, energized rather than exhausted, grabbed my laptop and typed into the search bar. Real estate lawyer, Cascade City, Oregon. Reviews scrolled past. I read carefully, looking for someone who understood property disputes, family conflicts, and the local Riverbend County court system. One name stopped me. Ruth Walsh, specializing in property rights and family real estate conflicts. Free initial consultation. Her photo showed a woman around my age, silver hair, sharp, intelligent eyes that didn't look like they missed much. I clicked request appointment, filled out the form, and hit submit before doubt could creep in. Confirmation appeared. Next available, tomorrow 2 p.m. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from possibility. The next afternoon, I stood outside Ruth Walsh's office in Northwest Cascade City, modest brick building, well-maintained. I'd arrived 15 minutes early, too nervous to sit in my car. The waiting room smelled like old books and fresh coffee. Legal volumes lined the walls, providing a sense of quiet authority. At exactly 2, a door opened. Mr. Cruz. Ruth Walsh was early 60s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, a navy suit that spoke of competence without pretense. Her handshake was firm, testing. Come in, please. Her office was organized but lived in. Diplomas from law school, family photos on the credenza, a slightly worn leather chair across from her desk. Tell me what brought you here. Start wherever feels right. I talked for 20 minutes. I didn't plan to. I just opened my mouth and everything poured out. The contract favor, Clifford's contempt, the dinner ultimatum, Elma's silent nod that broke something fundamental, walking out of my own house with one suitcase, the deletion of my workshop photos, the disastrous party. Ruth listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. Her expression stayed neutral, professional, but I caught something in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, like she'd heard versions of this domestic noir before. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she confirmed the legal foundation. Let me make sure I understand. You own the house outright, mortgage completely paid. Finished 3 years ago. Only your name on the deed. Never added anyone. That's correct. She leaned back, tapping her pen against her notepad. Mr. Cruz, you have strong legal standing, but I need to ask you one thing. Are you sure you want to pursue this? This is your daughter, your grandchild. I didn't hesitate. I want my house back. Something shifted in her expression. Approval, maybe? Good. Certainty matters in these cases. Judges can sense ambivalence. She explained Oregon law with the same clarity she'd probably used 100 times. For family members living without a written lease agreement, I had to provide a 30-day written notice terminating their tenancy. If they didn't leave after 30 days, I could file formal eviction through the court. Total process, 60 to 90 days. First, she said, pulling out a legal pad, we gather documentation. Bank statements proving you paid all expenses, tax records, utility bills, everything in your name. Then, we send the notice. If they contest, we're ready with the evidence, she quoted her retainer. $3,500 up front, covering notice preparation, initial filing if needed, and the first court appearance. Additional work bills at $250 per hour. I pulled out my checkbook without hesitation, wrote the amount, tore the check cleanly, and slid it across her desk. My hand was steady. Ruth accepted it, then said something unexpected, folding the check neatly. Mr. Cruz, I've handled dozens of these cases. The hardest part isn't the law. It's holding your resolve when family pressures you. Begging, crying, threats, manipulation. Can you do that? I thought of Elma's face at that dinner table. Her slow, deliberate nod of agreement with Clifford's ultimatum. They already did their worst. Threw me out of my own home. What's left? Ruth's slight smile told me I'd passed some test. We'll find out. She handed me a printed list, documents to gather, a timeline to follow, communication protocols. Everything, she stressed, goes through her unless absolutely necessary. She'd start drafting the 30-day notice immediately. Review appointment next week. At the door, she added, one more thing. This will get ugly before it gets better. Steel yourself. I paused, looked back at her. I'm already steel. I left Ruth's office with a checklist in my pocket and, for the first time in 2 weeks, a sense of direction that felt like solid ground beneath my feet. I'd spent 3 years paying for everything while they contributed nothing. Now I had 1 week to prove it in terms the court would understand. I was driving back to my sterile apartment when my phone vibrated. It was Ruth's paralegal. The subject line, Notice Delivery Protocol. The message was short and chilling. We have a small issue. Clifford may be trying to preempt the notice. Call us now. The issue the paralegal flagged was Clifford's maneuverability. He knew I was gone. He knew I was angry. Ruth's concern was that he might preempt the 30-day eviction by filing a protective order, claiming harassment or danger, just to tie the house up in court before my notice landed. It was a common, dirty trick. We worked through the weekend, converting my furious energy into meticulous documentation. The checklist Ruth gave me became my constant companion. Each morning, I'd review it, checking off items as I collected them. I requested bank statements going back 3 years, downloaded property tax records from the Riverbend County website, and pulled utility bills from provider accounts, all bearing my name. I created a spreadsheet, a professional habit I couldn't break. Column 1, date. Column 2, expense type. Column 3, amount. Column 4, proof document. The numbers accumulated with brutal clarity. Property taxes, $6,200 annually. Homeowners insurance, $1,800 yearly. Utilities averaging $400 monthly. Maintenance, repairs, improvements. The total over 3 years came to $85,400. Contributed by Clifford and Elma? 0. The spreadsheet told a story clearer than any emotional argument. Midweek, while searching old emails for documentation, I found something else. Messages from Clifford I'd forgotten about. Requests for temporary help with bills. April 2023. Dad, can you cover the electric this month? Big deal closing soon. August 2023. Need $500 for Emma's daycare. We'll pay back next week. January 2024. Could you handle property taxes this year? Cash is tight with holiday expenses. None of it repaid, ever. Temporary had become permanent, and I'd been too accommodating to notice. I forwarded the emails to Ruth. Her response came within an hour. Perfect print and save. Shows a clear pattern of financial dependence and lack of intent to pay rent. Thursday afternoon, Ruth called. I ran Clifford through public records, standard due diligence for these cases. Found something interesting. I sat down, gripping my coffee mug. What? 4 unpaid judgments from creditors, totaling $28,000. 2 credit card companies, 1 auto loan default, 1 unpaid business debt, dates ranging from 2022 to 2024. I sat there processing. $28,000 in debt while living rent-free in my house. My generosity wasn't sheltering his family, it was subsidizing his failure. This might explain why he's so determined to stay, Ruth continued. He has nowhere else he can afford. You've been his financial shelter, Elder. After hanging up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Clifford's contempt suddenly made sense. I wasn't just convenient, I was necessary, and people resent those they depend on. Friday morning, my phone chimed. Text from Elma. A photo. Emma, both smiling. Emma held a crayon drawing, crude stick figures, one labeled Grandpa in Elma's handwriting, captioned beneath. She asks about you every day. I stared at Emma's face. The ache in my chest was immediate and sharp, but I noticed what the message didn't say. No apology, no acknowledgement of what happened, just emotional manipulation through my granddaughter. I typed carefully. Tell her Grandpa loves her very much. Nothing about coming home. Nothing about forgiveness, just the truth. Saturday, I delivered everything to Ruth's office, a 3-ring binder organized by category with color-coded tabs. Ruth flipped through it, impressed. This is prosecution-level documentation. If they contest anything, we're ready. She showed me the notice. Formal legal language citing Oregon revised statutes, giving Clifford and Elma until a specific date, 30 days out, to vacate the premises. My hand trembled slightly when I signed the authorization. Just making it real, I muttered. It is real, Ruth said gently, and you are the one making it happen. That takes courage. Monday morning. Ruth texted. Notices sent. Delivery scheduled for this afternoon. I tried staying distracted, went to my landscape architecture office for the first time since everything happened, reviewed project bids, talked to my staff about upcoming installations. I acted normal, but my phone stayed in my pocket, volume on. I was waiting. 4:30 p.m. I was at a coffee shop reviewing paperwork when my phone started vibrating continuously. I pulled it out. Missed call from Elma. Another. Clifford's name. Again. Unknown numbers. Him trying different phones. I set the phone on the table, watching it light up, vibrating like something possessed. I didn't answer. I didn't call back. I just watched. Within 3 hours, 111 missed calls. I counted them. Text messages flooded in. Call me. What is this? Dad, please. You can't do this. I sipped my coffee, letting them panic. Ruth had been clear. No direct communication. Everything through her. By 8, the phone finally went quiet. One voicemail notification from Elma. I waited 10 minutes before listening, steeling myself. Her voice was wrecked. Dad, we got a letter from your lawyer. It says we have to leave in 30 days. Is this real? How can you do this to us? To Emma? Please call me, please. We need to talk. This has to be a mistake. I listened once, deleted it, and set the phone down. Her desperation was genuine, but she still didn't understand or wouldn't acknowledge what they'd done. No mention of Clifford's ultimatum, no reference to her silent betrayal, just shock that I was fighting back. I opened my laptop, emailed Ruth. They received the notice. As expected, panic. Her response came immediately. Don't engage. All communication through me. You're doing great. I typed back. Understood. They can call all they want. I'm not answering. I leaned back in the uncomfortable desk chair. For the first time since that dinner, a genuine smile crossed my face. Not happiness exactly. Something harder than that. Satisfaction. The feeling of someone who's been pushed around, finally pushing back. They'd spent 3 years treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. My phone rang again. It wasn't Clifford. It was the general manager of the Cascade City Landscaping Association. Eldon, I just got a call from Marcus Chen's office. He's asking about Clifford's contract execution timeline. There's a delay, and apparently Clifford is telling them the holdup is a dispute with his silent partner. He mentioned your name. The satisfaction drained out of me instantly. Clifford was using my legal fight as an excuse for his professional incompetence, dragging my reputation through the mud. The battle had just escalated from a private family dispute to a very public professional smear. The professional smear was a gut punch. Clifford was not just fighting for a roof, he was trying to sabotage my career to mask his own failure. I called Ruth immediately, relaying the message from the Landscaping Association. He's using the eviction as an excuse for failing on the $180,000 contract, I said, pacing my small apartment. He's claiming I'm the problem. Ruth's voice was calm, a steady line in the chaos. Expected. When they have no legal defense, they attack reputation. We'll draft a preemptive letter to Marcus Chen, factual, emphasizing that your property dispute is personal, not professional, and that you stand by your own work, not Clifford's. The next evening, when Elma's name lit up my screen again, I was ready. I let the phone ring twice before answering. Not hesitation, but control. Dad! Her voice exploded through the speaker, raw and hysterical. How can you evict us? We're your family. We have a child. I stayed silent, letting her exhaust herself. Then I heard a struggle, Emma's protest, and the phone changing hands. Clifford's voice came on, attempting calm, but strained underneath. Listen, Eldon, we can work this out. Just talk to me. My tone was ice. No anger, no emotion, just facts. I sent an official 30-day notice to terminate residency. You have 1 month to find other housing. The house is mine. His breathing changed. I could hear the shock that I wouldn't negotiate, wouldn't soften. You can't be serious. We have rights. Exercise them. My lawyer is waiting. His voice rose to a shout. You'll regret this. I'll sue. You won't see Emma ever again. The threat about Emma landed hard somewhere in my chest, but I didn't argue. Simply, see you in court. I hung up. The next afternoon, Clifford texted, demanding an in-person meeting. Ruth advised against it, but I agreed. On my terms. I chose a busy public coffee shop in Northwest Cascade City. Afternoon, weekday, witnesses present, professional environment. This was not a negotiation. It was a confrontation. I arrived first, taking a table with my back to the wall, clear view of the entrance. Clifford and Elma arrived 15 minutes late, a classic petty power play. Clifford wore an ill-fitting suit, trying to appear successful. Elma's eyes were red and swollen. They sat across from me. The small table became a battlefield. Clifford started with pressure. This is ridiculous. We're family. You're destroying relationships over a misunderstanding. What misunderstanding? I kept my voice level. You told me to obey or leave. I left. Now I'm taking back what's mine. He switched tactics, false reasonableness. I was having a bad day. You know how stress affects people. Can't we just reset? I stayed silent, letting him flounder. Then bargaining. What if we pay rent? We can work out an agreement. You haven't paid for anything in 3 years. Why would that change? His voice dropped, almost pleading. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have money for deposits and first month's rent. Throughout this, Elma said nothing. She stared at her untouched coffee, tears streaming silently. I watched her realize something, the cost of her silence. She wasn't defending Clifford anymore. She was drowning in the understanding that she'd chosen wrong. I addressed her directly. Elma, 3 years ago, I welcomed you into my home when Emma was born. I paid for everything while Clifford built his career. I asked for nothing but basic respect. Instead, you watched him throw me out and said nothing. Her voice came barely audible. Dad, I was scared. Of what? Of standing up for your father? That's exactly why I'm doing this. Sensing he was losing, Clifford played his last, most venomous card. He leaned forward, voice low and threatening. "You want to play hardball? Fine. You'll never see Emma again. We'll move across the country if we have to. She won't even remember you." The coffee shop noise faded. I stood slowly, picked up my jacket, and looked at Clifford with something close to pity. "Using your daughter as a weapon, that tells me everything I need to know about you." I looked at Elma. "And you're going to let him?" Her face crumpled, but she didn't contradict him. I walked out, leaving them at the table. Behind me, I heard Elma's voice, a raw whisper. "What have we done?" Outside, I paused to breathe, hands shaking slightly. The Emma threat had hit hard, but I didn't turn back. Through the window, I could see Elma crying harder, saying something sharply to Clifford. For the first time, she looked angry at her husband rather than just scared. Clifford looked defensive, argumentative. The crack in their united front was showing. I pulled out my phone and texted Ruth. "Meeting done." Clifford threatened to keep Emma from me. Should I be worried? Her reply came instantly. "Document everything. Empty threats can backfire in custody situations. We should plan to file an injunction preemptively if he tries to disappear." I was walking back to my car, already planning the next legal move, when another notification hit my screen. It wasn't a text, it was an official email from the Riverbend County Circuit Court. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. The email contained a file labeled Complaint E. Cruz. Clifford hadn't just threatened to sue, he had already filed, claiming I had breached an oral agreement for indefinite residency and demanding $50,000 for emotional distress and relocation expenses. He was using the very act of my generosity as the basis of a fraudulent lawsuit. Clifford's lawsuit, demanding $50,000 for emotional distress and claiming a breach of an oral agreement for indefinite residency, landed in my email like a declaration of war. It was brazen fraud, using my past generosity as the weapon. I immediately forwarded the complaint to Ruth. "Don't worry," she texted back within minutes. "Typical intimidation tactic. No merit." "Can you come to my office this afternoon?" Ruth's office felt familiar now, comfortable in a way that surprised me. She had the lawsuit printed out already, marked with highlighter and margin notes. "This is what desperate people do when they have no leverage," she said, flipping pages. "He's claiming oral agreement, emotional distress, implying you violated tenant rights. Problem for Clifford. Oral agreements require evidence. He has none. And I have documentation of ownership, and that I paid for everything," I countered. The tension was making me sharp. I felt like a tool in her hand. "Exactly. We counter with facts and proof. Clifford's motion is simply a smokescreen to delay the inevitable eviction." I pushed a question across the desk. "How long will this delay things?" "I need my house back." "Preliminary hearing in 2 weeks, Ruth stated. "When the judge dismisses his suit, which is highly likely, your eviction proceeds. If anything, this helps us by showing his bad faith. He is fighting the eviction by trying to create a fictitious claim of ownership." Over the next 2 weeks, we prepared. Ruth organized the evidence into a presentation format: the timeline of events, the financial records, the email trail of Clifford's temporary requests, the absence of any written agreement, the deed showing sole ownership. She drafted a response brief citing Oregon property law, precedents for owner-occupied homes, and the burden of proof for oral contracts. One afternoon, she coached me. "If you testify, Eldon, be factual, no emotion. Just dates, amounts, documents. Let the spreadsheet speak for itself." She emphasized my name on the utility bills, the tax statements, and the deed. The hearing day arrived. Riverbend County Courthouse, downtown Cascade City. I wore a suit, arrived with Ruth 30 minutes early. Clifford appeared with a new lawyer, a man who looked unprepared, carrying a thin manila folder versus Ruth's organized binder. We sat at opposite tables. The air was thick with unspoken anger and dread. The judge entered. Patricia Morrison, an older woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. Clifford's lawyer presented first, rambling about family hardship, good faith reliance on a father-in-law's generosity, an understanding of a permanent arrangement. He offered no documentation, just verbal claims. Ruth's turn was methodical. She was calm, precise. She projected the deed on a screen, my name only. She showed the bank statements, all payments by me, and then displayed the emails. Clifford requesting temporary help, promising repayment, and the lack of any written agreement. 7 minutes. That's all it took. The judge's questions were sharp. Where is your evidence of this oral agreement? Witnesses? Written communications reflecting the terms? Clifford's lawyer fumbled. Your Honor, it was understood between family members. Good faith reliance understanding isn't evidence, Judge Morrison stated flatly. She looked down at the documents Ruth had submitted. Plaintiff's claim is dismissed. No evidence of oral agreement. Defendant's eviction notice is valid and enforceable. The 30-day notice remains in effect. Plaintiffs must vacate by the date specified in the notice. The gavel struck. 30 minutes total. It was a clean surgical victory. Clifford slumped in his chair, his lawyer visibly sweating. Outside the courthouse, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in weeks. Ruth smiled, genuine, not just professional. That was textbook. Clifford's lawyer should have advised him not to file. He just wasted your time and validated your standing. As we walked toward the parking garage, Ruth paused. Do you have plans? I know a coffee place nearby. Good coffee, better than the courthouse cafeteria. I recognized this wasn't just professional courtesy. I'd like that, I said. We walked 3 blocks to a small cafe, sitting by the window as the afternoon traffic crawled past. Our conversation started about the case, but drifted quickly. Ruth asked about my landscape architecture work, genuinely interested, asking follow-up questions about the Marcus Chen project. I asked about her law practice, how she'd ended up specializing in property disputes. The coffee turned into 90 minutes. Ruth mentioned she'd lost her husband 5 years ago to cancer. Like my wife, I said quietly. Gone, leaving a void. We discovered we both loved classic films. Ruth mentioned Casablanca. One of my favorites. I lit up. The sacrifice at the end. Choosing the right thing over the easy thing. We both enjoyed hiking. I haven't gone since my husband died, Ruth admitted. We used to hike Mount Hood trails every summer. I stopped too, I said. Didn't seem right going alone. The conversation had a depth that surprised both of us. Real connection between two people who understood what it meant to live with loss. As we prepared to leave, Ruth said something that shifted everything. Eldon, I want to tell you something professional first. You're doing the right thing. Not the easy thing, the right thing. Fairness isn't cruelty. It's restoring balance when someone has taken more than their share. She paused. But personally, I admire your strength. Most people would have stayed and let themselves be walked over. You chose dignity. I met her eyes. I had a good lawyer who believed the law mattered. And I have a good client who believes he deserves respect. The moment hung between us. We exchanged personal cell numbers, not just office contacts, and made tentative plans for coffee again, maybe hiking when the weather improved. As we parted in the parking garage, Ruth touched my arm briefly. The next few weeks might get harder. Clifford knows he's lost legal options. People do unpredictable things when cornered. Call me if anything happens. Office or cell, doesn't matter. Driving back to my apartment, I felt something unfamiliar. The warmth of genuine human connection. Someone who saw me not as a wallet or an obstacle, but as a person worth knowing. I had won the battle for my house. Now, I had to win the war for my life. I pulled into my apartment's parking lot, relieved to be back in the sterile, safe space. But as I reached my door, I saw a slip of heavy stock paper taped squarely to the center panel. It wasn't court-related. It was a note, folded once, bearing the expensive logo of Chen Commercial Development, Marcus Chen. I ripped it open. The note read, Eldon, we need to discuss Clifford's status immediately. The Gateway project is stalled. His team has missed 3 deadlines. If he has a personal dispute that impacts this $180,000 commitment, you need to tell me now. Your word is on the line. Clifford had already escalated the private fight to the professional stage, and now the clock was ticking on my reputation. The note from Marcus Chen confirmed my worst fears. Clifford's incompetence was now threatening my 35 years of goodwill. I called Ruth immediately and read her the note. He's using the contract I vouched for as a shield for his failure. I said, the rage simmering low. Marcus is my biggest client. If Clifford breaches that $180,000 contract, my firm is finished. We have to handle this delicately, Ruth advised. We can't interfere with his contract directly, but we can make sure the legal consequences of his actions catch up to him faster than his professional problems. The 30-day notice period expired 2 days later. Clifford and Elma did not leave voluntarily. They remained entrenched, hoping my resolve would break, or that they could negotiate a new term. Ruth and I were at the Riverbend County Courthouse filing window by 10 a.m. This was the next phase, moving from notice to legal enforcement. I wrote a check for $285 to the court clerk, watching the official stamp my documents with an ominous court date. 3 weeks out. Early June. The final confrontation. He'll fight this, I said as we walked back to the parking garage. Of course he will, Ruth replied, tucking the stamped copies into her briefcase. But Eldon, we need to understand what we're really dealing with. If he's this desperate to stay, there's more we don't know than the $28,000 in judgments. That level of debt is unsustainable without an income stream. He's hiding a bigger problem. She recommended a forensic accountant, Gerald Martinez, someone she'd worked with before. $2,000 retainer for 3 days of investigation. It's an investment in leverage. I authorized the retainer that afternoon. My bank balance dropped, but I had learned that protecting my assets meant spending money to gain information. The next 3 days were agonizingly slow, waiting for the truth to surface. 2 days later, Gerald called with findings that explained everything. I was sitting at the small desk in my apartment when the phone rang. Mr. Cruz, Gerald began, your son-in-law used that landscaping contract, the one you helped him secure, as collateral for a $95,000 loan from a predatory lending company. I sat down hard in my apartment chair. My knees felt weak. He used the contract I gave him? Yes. The money went toward opening something called Clifford Real Estate Group. The business failed within 6 months. Now he can't complete the original landscaping work, faces a breach of contract lawsuit from Marcus Chen's commercial client, and the predatory lender is pursuing collection on the defaulted $95,000 loan. I stared at the wall for a long time after hanging up. He'd used my reputation, my professional connections, as collateral for a scam. Clifford wasn't just broke. He was facing financial annihilation and potentially fraud charges for misrepresenting his ability to complete the contract. At Ruth's office the next day, we reviewed Gerald's complete report. Documentation of the loan, the failed business registration, the mounting legal actions against Clifford. This explains everything, Ruth said, flipping pages. He's not just broke. He's facing multiple lawsuits and possibly fraud charges if he misrepresented his ability to fulfill that $180,000 contract. He needs your house not just as a home, but as a legal fortress. If he served eviction papers there, his creditors will know he has no assets left to seize. What do we do with this information? Ruth looked up, her expression cold and determined. We can anonymously, through proper legal channels, inform his creditors and the commercial client about his current housing situation. It increases the pressure. It forces his hand. I hesitated. This felt aggressive, different from simply reclaiming my house. Ruth read my expression instantly. He threatened to take Emma from you. He threw you from your own house. This is justice, Eldon, not revenge. He created this situation. We're just making sure the consequences find him. I nodded slowly. Do it. Ruth drafted anonymous but factual letters, routing them through legal service companies to maintain plausible deniability. The pressure was about to increase from multiple directions. 2 days later, near midnight, my phone rang. Elma. I almost didn't answer, then reconsidered. Her voice was wrecked when I picked up. Dad, I need to talk to you. Clifford doesn't know I'm calling. I sat on the edge of my bed, every muscle tense. What happened? I know about the loan. He used your contract to take out $95,000 that he blew on that real estate group. A collector showed up here today, looking for the house to seize the collateral. He lied to me, Dad, for months. Her voice broke, the sound ripping through the silence. I chose him over you, and the whole time he was lying to both of us. She was crying, but this was different. Not manipulation, Not pleading. This was actual recognition of what she'd done. She was finally breaking free of his control. "He lied to me, Dad," Elma sobbed into the phone. "For months we're drowning in debt I didn't know about. I thought we were struggling because real estate was slow. He told me your help with the contract would solve everything. I chose him over you. I let him throw you out of your own house. And the whole time he was lying to both of us." This was the crack I had been waiting for, the moment the light finally hit her. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness, but for my strength. "Elma," I said quietly, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "What are you going to do?" Long pause. "I don't know. I have Emma to think about. I can't just leave with nowhere to go. I lost my footing when I quit my nursing job to help him run his business. I have nothing." "The eviction hearing is in 2 weeks," I reminded her, keeping my voice steady, professional, like Ruth. "You need to prepare. You need to decide whether you want to save yourself and Emma or save Clifford." I closed my eyes. It hurt to set this boundary, but it was necessary. I didn't owe her rescue. I owed her the truth and the chance to make her own choice. The first collector was a shock, Dad, but this evening a registered letter came. It was from the commercial client, Marcus Chen's company. It says Clifford is being sued for breach of contract on the $180,000 job. He was served at the house. And Clifford? He just smashed his phone and said it was your fault, that you interfered. He blames me. Even in financial ruin, the entitlement never wavered. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a while, then texted Ruth. Elma called. "She's learning about Clifford's debts and the fraud. She's breaking." Ruth's response: "Can I come by?" Not lawyer stuff, just checking in. 20 minutes later, Ruth arrived with takeout containers, Chinese food, nothing fancy. We sat on my small couch eating from cardboard boxes. "How are you really doing?" she asked. I considered the question honestly. 5 months ago, I was living in my house, helping my family, thinking I was doing the right thing. Now I'm in a studio apartment fighting them in court. My daughter just apologized for the first time. I don't know if I should feel victorious or just tired. Ruth set down her container. "You can feel both. You can be right and still hurt." She told me about her husband's final days, how she'd learned that doing the hard thing doesn't mean it stops being hard. I talked about my wife, about the years of learning to be alone. The conversation was intimate in a way that had nothing to do with strategy or legal maneuvering. It was a vulnerability I hadn't dared show anyone since my wife passed. "You're doing the right thing, but it's okay if it doesn't feel easy," she said as she left near midnight. "It's getting more complicated. The right things usually do." The next morning, the exhaustion was gone. I knew what I had to do. I called Ruth and gave her a new instruction, a final offer to Elma that would test her resolve. "I want you to draft a document for the hearing," I told her. "I will publicly offer to dismiss the eviction against Elma and Emma and allow them to remain in the house temporarily with financial assistance if Clifford vacates immediately and unconditionally. It's the moral high ground and it forces Elma's hand in front of a judge." Ruth paused. "That's a big risk, Eldon. If she says no, you lose the high ground. If she chooses him and his lies over the safety of her daughter now that she knows the truth, then I have no daughter left to save. I will have my house back either way." Over the next week, Elma didn't call again. Instead, I started getting small, quiet signals. My neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, mentioned seeing Elma sorting boxes in the garage late at night. Clifford's junk, not mine. Then, a quick call from a contact at the Cascade City Clinic. Elma had been asking about getting her nursing license reactivated and had interviewed for a part-time position. She was taking tangible steps toward independence. One morning, when I checked my apartment mailbox, I found a small folded paper hidden inside a junk flyer. It was a crayon drawing on thick paper. Emma's work. She had drawn a crude yellow sun. Scrawled below, in neat adult handwriting, were 3 words. I took the job. It was the sign I needed. Elma was fighting back, quietly choosing her daughter's future over her husband's control. She was paying the price for her earlier mistake by moving toward a hard-earned dignity. We were ready for the final confrontation. The morning of the eviction hearing, I woke early in my studio apartment, put on my best suit, and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. 64 years old, fighting to reclaim my own house from my own family. Surreal. I met Ruth at the courthouse an hour before the hearing. She wore a sharp charcoal suit and carried her organized binder. In a conference room, we reviewed the strategy one final time. "Remember," she said, her voice low, "Clifford's lawyer will try emotional appeals. Don't react. Let me handle it. Your job is to be the honest, generous homeowner, the one who gave the family 3 years of shelter and is now simply asking for his property back." She touched my hand briefly. "You are ready." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Family court division designed for these disputes. Ruth and I sat at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Clifford arrived with a third lawyer. This one looked even less prepared, a public defender from Discount Legal Services. Then, Elma entered separately. She sat in the gallery behind Clifford, but not next to him. She wouldn't make eye contact with either of us. The positioning told the whole story. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, the same woman who had dismissed Clifford's frivolous $50,000 suit. She recognized the case immediately. The Cruz eviction matter. Counselors, let's proceed efficiently. Clifford's attorney presented first. Pure emotional manipulation. "Your Honor, we're talking about a young family with a 3-year-old child being thrown onto the street. Mr. Cruz is the child's grandfather. What kind of man evicts his own grandchild?" Ruth stood instantly. "Objection. Facts, not speculation about character." Sustained, counsel. Stick to legal arguments. The lawyer floundered, presenting no real evidence, just claims about hardship and family bonds. 10 minutes, and Clifford's defense collapsed under its own weakness. Ruth's turn was methodical, calm, and precise. "Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. Mr. Cruz owns the property outright. Deed entered as evidence. He provided proper 30-day notice. Notice entered as evidence. Defendants failed to vacate." She paused, letting the silence hang. "However, Mr. Cruz is not heartless." She then executed our final strategy. "He has repeatedly offered to allow his daughter and granddaughter to remain in the house if Mr. Clifford vacates. This offer has been rejected. Mr. Cruz is willing to provide his daughter with reasonable time to secure alternative housing and even financial assistance for deposits. But Mr. Clifford must leave." Defendants chose to remain together rather than accept this compromise. Ruth projected the emails on the courtroom screen. My offers to help Elma, all documented, all ignored. Judge Morrison made notes, then looked directly at Clifford. "Is it true, Mr. Cruz, that Mr. Eldon Cruz offered to let your wife and child stay if you left?" Clifford shifted nervously. "He's trying to split up my family." "That's not what I asked. Did he make that offer? Yes or no?" "Yes, but thank you." The judge turned to Elma. "Mrs. Cruz, do you wish to make a statement?" Elma stood. Her voice came quiet but clear, echoing through the small room. "Your Honor, I would like to accept my father's offer. My daughter and I need time to find housing, but my husband should leave. I have a job starting soon." The courtroom went silent. Clifford's head snapped toward her. "What?" Elma didn't look at him. Judge Morrison nodded. "Given the circumstances, I order the defendants to vacate the property within 14 days. However, I am willing to allow Ms. Elma Cruz and her minor child to remain temporarily, under Mr. Eldon Cruz's discretion, while she secures housing. Mr. Clifford Cruz must vacate immediately." The gavel struck. In the courthouse hallway, Clifford exploded at Elma. "You're siding with him after everything." Elma's voice stayed quiet but firm, carrying the weight of the last 3 months. "After everything you lied about, the business, the $95,000 debt, using Emma as a weapon, I'm done." Ruth and I stood several feet away. Clifford noticed us and started to approach. Ruth stepped slightly forward, a protective stance. Clifford stopped, realizing he had no move left. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You destroyed my life." I kept my voice calm. "No, you did that yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy mine." He turned and walked away alone. After he left, Elma approached me tentatively. "Dad, can we talk?" Ruth gave us space, moving down the hallway. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Elma said, tears streaming. "I chose him over you. I was weak and stupid and scared. But I need help for Emma, not for me. I know I don't deserve it, but she shouldn't suffer for my mistakes." I saw my daughter clearly for the first time in years, not the woman who betrayed me, but the frightened person who made terrible choices. I opened my arms. Elma collapsed into them, sobbing. "You can stay," I said quietly, "both of you, until you're back on your feet. But things will be different." She nodded against my shoulder. "Thank you. I'll make it right, I promise." That evening, I drove back to my house, sitting in the car outside my own driveway. I was home. I finally had the key in my hand, but I didn't step out yet. My phone rang. It wasn't Ruth. It was an unknown number. I answered hesitantly. "Mr. Cruz, I'm calling from Nevada." "I'm Clifford's sister. I need to know the date you are officially back in the house. I'm serving him with divorce papers on behalf of Elma. She needs them filed before he leaves the state." My hand holding the key was suddenly steady. Elma hadn't just chosen me and Emma in court. She had chosen a clean break. I gave the woman the date, hung up, and finally stepped onto the porch. 14 days after the court ruling, I stood in my own driveway for the first time in 5 months. I was watching Clifford throw boxes into his beat-up truck with the kind of angry carelessness that told me he was still nursing his hatred. Ruth's advice echoed in my mind. Document everything. I walked through each room with my phone camera raised, filming systematically. Clifford loading boxes, disputed items, the condition of my house. In the living room, I found him holding my vintage lamp, the one I'd bought at an estate sale 12 years ago. "That stays," I said calmly. He turned, face contorted. "Taking what's mine?" "That lamp stays. The tools in the garage stay. Take only what you brought." "You can't tell me—" I held up my phone, showing him the photos I'd taken before he moved in. "Try me." He set the lamp down hard enough that I winced. An hour later, I caught him loading my professional-grade landscaping equipment, trimmer, mower, edger, thousands of dollars worth, into his truck. I called the non-emergency police line. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. I showed them documentation, photos, receipts, and the court order specifying Clifford must vacate. "Sir," one officer said to Clifford, professional but firm, "take only your personal belongings. The court order is clear." Clifford tried to argue, but they weren't interested. One officer stayed to supervise the rest of his packing. By evening, Clifford had loaded far less than he'd hoped. He stood in the driveway, glaring at me, with the officer still present. "You'll regret this." "You destroyed my family." I kept my voice level. "You destroyed your own family when you lied to them. I just stopped letting you destroy mine." He drove away alone. 3 days later, Elma met with a family lawyer Ruth had recommended, not Ruth herself, due to conflict of interest. She filed for divorce, irreconcilable differences, and financial deception. She requested primary custody of Emma with supervised visitation for Clifford. That same week, she returned to work. She'd kept her nursing license current and found a part-time position at a Cascade City clinic 3 days a week. I helped with Emma on her work days. The house slowly transformed from a war zone back to a home. Late nights, Elma and I talked at the kitchen table after Emma was asleep. Honest conversations about fear, manipulation, weakness, and what it means to choose dignity over false peace. One evening, she asked me to sit on the back porch. "I need to say something, and I need you to really hear it." Her voice was steady despite tears. I was terrified of being alone. Clifford made me feel like I couldn't survive without him. So, when he said jump, I asked how high, even when it meant betraying you. She looked at me directly. "You were the one person who never manipulated me, and I threw you away because I was scared." "Fear makes us do things we never imagined," I said. "But you made a different choice in that courtroom. That's what matters." "You taught me something." Elma wiped her eyes. "Fairness isn't cruelty. Boundaries aren't abandonment. I'm teaching Emma that now." By late July, Ruth had become a regular presence, dinner twice a week, Sunday afternoons helping Emma with a garden project in the backyard. Emma adored her, calling her Miss Ruth. The relationship between Ruth and me deepened naturally, comfortable, stable, built on mutual respect and shared values. Meanwhile, Clifford's financial situation became a public spectacle. The commercial client, whose $180,000 contract he'd failed to complete, filed a lawsuit. 3 creditors filed judgments. The Oregon Real Estate Agency opened an investigation into complaints, and his license was suspended pending review. Clifford filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy and moved to Nevada. Court-ordered visitation with Emma was supervised, limited to video calls twice monthly until he completed parenting classes and financial counseling. He hadn't completed a single session. Late July evening, I sat alone in my living room. Emma and Elma were asleep upstairs. Ruth had gone home, but would return tomorrow. I'd set aside $8,000 for Elma's deposit first month's rent. I thought about Clifford, professionally ruined, buried in debt. I'd expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt only peace. I didn't destroy Clifford. His lies, his fraud, his manipulation did that. I simply stopped being collateral damage. The last weekend of July, the 3 of us worked in the garden. Emma with her toy shovel, Elma planting marigolds and petunias, me spreading mulch, kneeling in the dirt, hands in soil. "Grandpa, why did Daddy leave?" Emma asked, the first time she'd asked directly. I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people. Your daddy made some of those choices, but your mom made a brave choice to keep you safe and happy. That's what matters." Elma mouthed, "Thank you," across the garden bed. Early August evening, Emma's 4th birthday. Tonight, a pre-celebration dinner. I grilled vegetables and chicken on my deck. Inside, Ruth helped Emma frost cupcakes. Through the window, I watched my daughter happy, my granddaughter giggling, and Ruth, someone who became family not through blood but through choice and time. We sat for dinner. Elma shared news. "I found an apartment, 2 bedrooms, good school district, 20 minutes from here. Move-in is September 1st. She was nervous. "That's wonderful," I said genuinely. I transferred the $8,000 to her account. "Consider it a gift. You earned it." Later, Ruth and I were alone on the deck. "I didn't expect to find someone again," I confessed. "I thought the same," Ruth said. Then a 64-year-old landscape architect walked into my office with a property dispute and a determination I hadn't seen in years. I queued up the vintage record player, Frank Sinatra's "The Way You Look Tonight." Ruth and I danced slowly on the deck under August stars. Elma watched from her chair, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. Emma clapped from her window. A family rebuilt. As I stood alone on my deck, I looked at the thriving garden, the warm lights from inside, and the August stars above. I finally understood that what I'd fought for wasn't behind me. It was right here, blooming in the present and stretching into a future I finally got to choose. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.